Hi guys, Wheelie here, and these are bean stitch gift baskets crocheted from T-shirt yarn. You can use 2 colours or just one. I'll be working with 2 colours today. The second colour is used for just 1 round to make the bean stitches stand out a bit more. The basket is finished with a round of slip stitches and there's a simple but sturdy handle. I've made rather a lot of baskets with this pattern. This batch are for my friends as Mother's Day gifts. I have used a slightly different pattern to make this smaller basket, but I'm showing it to you because I want you to have an idea of how your basket could look if you work with just 1 colour yarn. Using just 1 colour really emphasises the texture of the stitches. Another option is to make a plainer basket, something like this burgundy one, which follows much the same pattern as the other baskets, but I've replaced the bean stitch round with a single crochet round. You'll need some t-shirt yarn. I'm working with soft grey and a very light pink. You can use just 1 colour if you prefer. This is Kmart's Anko brand, about the cheapest t-shirt yarn I could find, and one of these 250 gram balls is enough yarn for me to make 2 baskets, with the scrap of yarn left being enough to use for the bean stitch round in another basket. However, the quantity of yarn you use will very much depend on the hook you use. This yarn label recommends a 12mm hook. In my opinion, that is way too large. In the same brand, but using the pink or the white, I go down to a 7mm or sometimes even a 6.5mm hook. The grey is a little stiffer, so I use a 9mm hook. In choosing the right hook for your yarn, what you're looking for is a hook that doesn't leave enormous gaps in your work, but isn't so small that the yarn keeps slipping off. If this is your first t-shirt yarn project, be prepared for more trial and error than is usually required in selecting a hook. You'll also need a pair of scissors and something to do your weaving in with. If you don't have a needle with a big enough eye to handle t-shirt yarn, I'll show you how to use a small hook to do the weaving in. I definitely prefer to use a needle, but I only recently got a needle that works with this yarn. When I was trying to thread t-shirt yarn onto my other needles, I would have said I much prefer to weave in with a hook. Start by making a magic circle. There are a few different methods, so you can go your own way or you can follow along with me. I hold onto the cut end, the tail, in my right hand and lay it across the top of 2 of my fingers and hold it between the middle finger and the ring finger of my left hand. I've let go of the tail. Next I pick up the working end from back here and pull it around behind my fingers and slip it between the middle finger and the ring finger of my left hand too. Now I take it over my palm to make a cross shape with the yarn. Then I take it around behind my hand again and slip it between my ring finger and my pinky. Now I can hold all of that in place on my palm with my thumb. I don't have a lot of tension, I'm holding it fairly loosely. When I turn my hand over, you can see there are 2 lines of yarn and the tail is poking out there. I slip my hook under the first piece of yarn and over the second. Using the hook, I pull it down under the first and then I do a little twist. And that is my magic circle. I just need to chain 1 on this piece of yarn to secure it. I'm going to slip the tail out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. I slide my hook backward under that piece of yarn. I loosen up a bit and I give myself some slack so I can chain 1 by pulling it through the working loop. Now I turn my fingers towards me and take the magic circle off my fingers. That way my magic circle is facing the correct way with the tail on the left here. Time for round 1, which is 6 single crochets worked into the circle over this tail. Insert your hook into the circle. Make sure you have 1 loop back here and 2 pieces of yarn from your circle and its tail. Yarn over and pull through the circle to pull up a loop. There are 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull through both loops. That's the first of my 6 single crochets. I need 5 more single crochets in this circle. All of those need to be worked over the tail of the circle. That's my second of the 6 single crochets. The next 4 are worked in exactly the same way. I'm going to speed this bit up. If you're working along with me, you might like to pause the video while you finish your 6 single crochets and then switch it back on when you're ready to finish the round with me. When you've got your 6 single crochets worked into your circle, pull on the tail to start to close up the circle and then slip stitch to the first single crochet to finish the round. To slip stitch, insert your hook under the top of the first single crochet, get your hook under both loops of the V, yarn over and pull through the stitch and then pull through the loop on your hook. That's the slip stitch join done. Pull on the tail really hard now to completely close up the circle and don't forget you'll need to weave in the magic circle's tail when you finish the basket. In round 2, we're going to put 2 single crochets in each stitch from round 1, so there will be 12 stitches in this round. Start by chaining 1, then place the first single crochet just here, immediately to the left of the chain 1. Insert the hook under both loops of the V and single crochet. Then squeeze a second single crochet into the exact same spot. We're going to do the same thing all the way around the circle, and if you're still learning to work in the round, it's a good idea to count your stitches. So this is 3, and the 4th stitch goes right next to the 3rd. 2 single crochets go in the next stitch as well, and continue like that around the circle. If you're working along with me, pause the video now and turn it back on when you have 12 stitches. I'm going to jump ahead to show you how to finish the round. This is my 12th stitch, the last single crochet of round 2. This space here does not get a stitch. I know it looks like a gap, but it's the top of the slip stitch join from round 1, and we count it and the spot we work the first stitches of the round as 1 stitch space. You only work on one side of this space or you will end up with too many stitches. If you keep count, you can reassure yourself that you haven't accidentally missed a space. When you have 12 stitches, slip stitch to the first single crochet to finish the round. Just like last time, insert your hook under the top of the first stitch, yarn over and pull through the stitch, and pull through the loop on your hook, and that finishes round 2. In round 3, we'll have a stitch count of 18. Start by chaining 1 to get up to height and put 2 single crochets in this first space, just like the last round. And the second one right in next to it. But this round we're going to follow a different pattern and put just 1 single crochet in the next space. And then 2 single crochets in the next space. One single crochet in the next space. That is the pattern for round 3. 2 single crochets. Then 1 single crochet in the next. Pause the video here and keep doing that. If you're on track with the pattern, your 18th stitch will be a single crochet on its own in the last space, just here. Don't work into the top of the slip stitch that ended round 2. Slip stitch to the first single crochet to finish the round, and that gap will close up. I've inserted my hook. I yarn over and pull through the stitch, then pull through the loop on my hook to slip stitch, and that finishes round 3. The 4th round is the final round of the base of the basket, and we'll have 24 stitches. Chain 1, and then place 2 single crochets in the first space. That's 1, and a second one in the same spot. And then 1 single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. So 1 here, and 1 here, and then repeat that. 2 single crochets in the next stitch, one single crochet in the next, 1 single crochet in the next. Sticking to that pattern, it's 2 single crochets in this one, and there'll be 1 single crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. Pause the video here and keep following that repeating pattern. I will meet you at the end of the round, but don't get ahead of me as we're not going to be slip stitching there. If you're on track with the pattern, your 24th stitch, the last stitch of round 4, will be a single crochet on its own in the final stitch space. I've got 24 stitches. There's a little gap there because we're not working in the slip stitch from the previous round. Like I said, we aren't going to slip stitch to finish round 4. This is the last round of the basket space, and we're still going to join to the first stitch of the round, but instead of slip stitching, pull the working loop up a little bit and slip your hook out of it. Keep the working loop safe while you insert your hook into the first stitch of the round from the back. Usually we go from the front like this, but we're going to go from the back this time. Still get the hook under the V at the top of the stitch, under both loops of it. Get your hook back into the working loop and pull it through. So the loop is on the hook, we've pulled it through from the front to the back. You might need to tighten it up a bit, give it a bit of a pull. The circle you have now is the size of the base of your basket. From now on, we'll be building up the basket's height, not increasing its size, so no more squeezing 2 stitches into 1 stitch from the round below. Round 5 starts with a chain 1. We're going to be working in back loop single crochet, which will create an edge to the base. Instead of inserting the hook under the full V of the stitch, we're going to insert the hook down into the center of the V and come out catching just one loop, the back loop of the stitch you're working into. From this point, it's like a normal single crochet. Yarn over and pull up a loop. There are 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull through both loops. I'll show you that back loop single crochet again. There is the V of the stitch. I insert the hook down into the middle of the V and bring the hook out in the back of my work. I've got just the back loop of the V on my hook and I single crochet. So for this round, I'm putting 1 single crochet in the back loop of each stitch from the round below. There are going to be 24 stitches in this round, the same number as there were in the last round. I'm just going to get myself a bit more yarn. Okay. Once you have the hang of the back loop single crochets, it's just about putting 1 stitch into each stitch from the round below. I'll show you a few more back loop single crochets just to make sure you've understood, but I don't want to bore you to death with a 2-hour video on a tiny basket either. So if you're working along with me, I'll get you to pause now and I'll skip ahead to the end of the round. This is my 24th back loop single crochet. I'm ready to finish the 5th round. Do you see this line of yarn here? Don't place the 25th single crochet into it. This is the join from the round below. It looks a little different from a normal slip stitch, which is why we did it. It kind of disappears into the other stitches. Flip your work now. You can see that we've created the base. This round, we are just going to slip stitch to the first single crochet. So insert your hook under both loops of the top of the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and pull that loop through the working loop. Round 6, 7 and 8 are all pretty much the same. Start the rounds by chaining 1 to get up to height, and start in this very first spot, the first slightly squished V to the left of the chain 1, and put 1 single crochet, a normal single crochet worked under both loops of the V, into this first spot, and then 1 single crochet into each stitch in the round below. We'll have 24 stitches in round 6, 7 and 8. I'm going to skip ahead to show you the slip stitch join again. This is my 24th stitch. This is the slip stitch join from the last round. Don't put a stitch into it. Slip stitch to the first single crochet, insert the hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, pull that loop through the working loop. And round 7 is just like round 6. Chain 1 to get up to height, and starting in the first spot, single crochet in each stitch. When you have 24 stitches, slip stitch to the first single crochet and start round 8 in exactly the same way. If you're working along with me, pause the video and crochet up round 6, 7 and 8. I'd like you to come back before the slip stitch that finishes round 8. Don't get ahead of me because I'm going to show you how to bring in the second colour of yarn on the slip stitch join so I can start round 9 with colour 2. You can bring in your yarn in whatever way you prefer. There is no right way, but I will walk you through the method I like to use with this pattern. I've got the working loop of the grey yarn on my hook, but I'm going to leave the grey yarn hanging there for a round. I'm not going to cut it. I make a fold in my colour 2 yarn, leaving roughly 10 centimetres or 4 inches of tail. There's no knot, I've just folded it to create a loop. Insert the hook into the first single crochet of the round in the same way you've done every time you've slip stitched to finish a round. Then hook the new yarn and pull it through the stitch, and pull it through the working loop on the hook, colour 2 is now in play. The colour 1 yarn will just hang at the back there. I will pull on it to tighten this bit up. You might also want to pull on colour 2, both bits of it, to close that up a bit. And I'm going to start crocheting with colour 2. I will work the first stitch of the round over its tail. That will start to secure it, but when the basket is finished, I'm going to weave in the tail properly. Some people tie a knot instead. If you want to do that, you'd tie 2 simple knots or a reef knot with the colour 2 tail and this colour 1 yarn. I prefer to weave in later because I find that tying a knot with the colour 2 yarn that I'm going to pick up and use again later can affect my tension, and sometimes the knot can be visible, but I know a lot of people prefer to tie knots with t-shirt yarn, so you may want to experiment and see what works for you. Round 9 is the bean stitch round. The round starts with a chain 1 to get up to height, and we'll work the first bean stitch just here in the first stitch. I'm going to pull on the colour 2 tail again to tighten this up a little. The bean stitches this pattern uses are 3 yarn over bean stitches. Insert the hook under both loops, put the tail on top of the hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, pull it up higher than you do for a single crochet. There are 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, insert the hook into the same spot for a second time. There are 3 loops on the hook and the top of the stitch in the tail, yarn over and pull up a loop. There are 4 loops on the hook, yarn over and insert the hook for a 3rd time. There are 5 loops on the hook and the top of the stitch, yarn over and pull up another loop. There are 6 loops on the hook now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to yarn over and pull through all of those. To make it a little easier, hold on to the stitch down here and pull on it, yarn over and rotate the hook down and try to pull through all 6 loops at once. And that's the first bean stitch. I'll let go of the tail now. I've just pulled on it again so that pink slips out of sight. Back to the pattern. Chain 1, skip the next stitch and bean stitch in the one after. Insert the hook. There's 1 loop on the hook and the stitch. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Pull it up higher than a single crochet. There are 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over and insert the hook. There are 3 loops and the top of the stitch on the hook. Yarn over and pull up a loop. There are 4 loops on the hook. Yarn over and insert the hook for a 3rd time. There are 5 loops on the hook and the top of the stitch. Yarn over and pull up a loop. There are 6 loops on the hook. Yarn over and pull through all 6. And that's the bean stitch. Chain 1, skip 1 and bean stitch. Insert the hook and pull up a loop. Yarn over, insert the hook for a 2nd time and pull up a loop. Yarn over, insert the hook for a 3rd time and pull up a loop. When there are 6 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull through all 6. And that's the pattern. If you're working along with me, pause the video now and continue. Chain 1, skip 1, bean stitch in the next. There are 12 bean stitches in this round. I will meet you to work the final bean stitch and finish round 9. I'm just finishing the 12th bean stitch. You should have 1 empty stitch and the slip stitch join from the last round, which we ignore. I'm going to chain 1 and then I will change back to colour 1 when I slip stitch to the first bean stitch of the round. You can of course change yarn in any way you like. I insert the hook into the top of the first bean stitch, drop the colour 2 yarn I've been using, pick up the colour 1 yarn from where it's hanging, yarn over with colour 1, pull it through the stitch and through the loop on the hook, and round 9 is finished. If you have a look at the inside of the basket, you can see that because I carried the grey yarn instead of cutting it, there is a line of grey yarn visible inside the basket. I don't think you can see it from the front, and it saves me weaving in 2 tails, but if you prefer, you can cut colour 1 and bring in a fresh piece to start round 10. Speaking of cutting, I'm going to cut my pink yarn, colour 2, because I finished with it. I will do the weaving in at the end. Round 10. Chain 1 to get up to height, This is the last round before the handle, and it's really simple. It's the same as round 6, 7 and 8 in fact. Starting in this first stitch, just to the left of the chain 1, single crochet. And keep on single crocheting. Some of your single crochets will be in stitches and some will be in chain spaces, but because of the way bean stitches work, there's not a lot of difference. The chain 1 spaces feel more like working into an actual stitch because they're sort of on top of the bean stitches. Anyway, just place 1 stitch in each all the way around the basket and you will have 24 stitches. If you're working along with me, pause the video now and switch it back on when you're ready to slip stitch to finish the round. I'm about to work my final single crochet. One last reminder, I hope you're not sick of them. You don't work into the slip stitch join from the previous round, so the 24th and final stitch goes here. I'm leaving the slip stitch from the previous round empty and I'm slip stitching to the first single crochet of the round. Okay, you don't need to take your hook out. I'm just taking mine out because I need to tighten up the colour 2 tail and it's inside the basket. And you'll see when I pull on it, that actually tightens up that slip stitch join from the previous round, which did look quite big. And that is the basket itself finished. I hope you're really pleased with yours. The next bit we're going to do is the handle. The handle starts with a chain of 18. If you want a longer or shorter handle, there isn't a specific multiple for this chain, so feel free to adjust the length of it. And check out how fast I can chain. And make myself laugh at least. I figured I could speed past this bit. You guys are clearly capable of chaining. Once you have your chain of 18, this next bit is important. We're going to attach this end of the chain back to the basket. We're going to skip 10 stitches and slip stitch to the 11th stitch. When you're counting skip stitches, you don't count this first stitch. The slightly squished V that is immediately to the left of the chain, that stitch counts as already being used as the chain is coming out of it. So don't count this one, start counting from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and slip stitch to 11. Trust me on this, I know that half of 24 is 12, but you do need to slip stitch to the 11th stitch along for your basket handle to be centered. Just a normal slip stitch. Now slip stitch again to the stitch 1 to the left. And that is the first stage of the basket handle done. Check that you're happy with the length. The second stage of the handle reinforces it. We're going to slip stitch back along the chain. Have a look at the chain. You'll see that the top of the chain is smooth and each chain has a V shape. When you look at the back of the chain, it has little bumps running along the back of it. We're going to slip stitch into the back bumps. When I say into the bumps, I mean insert the hook so it catches the bump and you have 1 loop on your hook. The first slip stitch goes just here. We're not going to chain, we're just going to start slip stitching. The first spot we're slip stitching is actually into a slip stitch rather than a chain, which means that we're going to be slip stitching 19 times to get us to the end of the handle. I'm going to make this bit look a bit awkward as I haven't been able to find a comfortable angle to hold my basket and still film it clearly. I think I've probably compromised on both. I hope you'll be able to follow, and my wrists are hurting. So here we go. Insert the hook, yarn over, pull it through the back bump and through the loop on the hook. Insert the hook into the next back bump, yarn over, pull it through the back bump and the working loop. And continue on like that. 1 slip stitch into each back bump. Now that you've seen what I mean, I'm going to skip ahead, that way I can hold this more comfortably, and I'll meet you at the other end of the handle. This is my 19th slip stitch. I've slip stitched all the way along the chain. Have a look at the handle. The slip stitches have reinforced it and they've given it a nice woven sort of look. There is one final round to work before this basket is finished. it's a round of slip stitches around the top of the basket. The slip stitches give a very slight ridge, a bit of extra width, I guess, to the top of the basket, and they add a bit of detail. The next step is going to involve pulling the working loop to the inside of the basket and then pulling it back to the outside of the basket. It might seem like you're doing something and then undoing it, but the first step secures the handle to the basket again, and the second step gets the working loop to where it needs to be, so when we work the round of slip stitches, the V shape of the slip stitches will actually show. This bit can be a little fiddly, so I'll move extra slowly. Take the hook out of the working loop, keep the loop safe. I'm going to insert my hook into this stitch here. It's the stitch immediately to the right of the first stitch of the round, the stitch which the chain of 18 is coming from. So from the inside of the basket, insert the hook into that stitch under both loops of it, then slip the working loop onto your hook and pull it to the inside of the basket. When the loop is inside the basket, pick up your yarn and chain 1. The next step is to take the hook out of the working loop again, keep that loop safe, insert the hook into this stitch here, the stitch 1 to the right of the stitch we just pulled the working loop through. Last time we inserted the hook into this stitch from the inside of the basket. This time we're going into this stitch from the outside. Once your hook is under both loops of the stitch, get the working loop back onto your hook and pull it to the outside of the basket. And now you can actually start crocheting again. In this final round, you slip stitch into each stitch. With the handles, I'll slip stitch once on this side and once on the other side of the handle. I'll do that with you. I slip stitch into the next stitch. This is a bit awkward looking, but it's not difficult, it's just the angle I'm holding it. Do you see that's created a little V shape? That's all we're doing with this round, adding that little bit of trim. Next we go right across the handle, not into that gap here, right over it to the next actual stitch on the other side of the handle. Again, that's just created the V shape. Continue on putting a slip stitch in each stitch. If you're working along with me, pause the video and switch it back on when you're nearing the next spot the handle joins the basket. I'll skip ahead and meet you there. I've reached the other point where the handle attaches to the basket. I slip stitch once on this side and then I take my hook right over the handle and slip stitch across the handle and into the stitch on the other side. I go right across the handle and slip stitch. Easy as that. From here, you'll keep slip stitching. If you're going to weave in with a smaller hook, you need to slip stitch all the way around, finishing with a slip stitch where we pulled the working loop through to the outside. If you're going to use a needle to weave in, I suggest you finish slip stitching at this point, in the second last stitch. Then you can use your needle to finish off really neatly. Now that the crochet part is done, I'm going to briefly demonstrate the two methods you could use to weave in the tails. If you're using a needle, stop stitching when you reach this point. This is where I pulled the working loop through. It's where you'll place the final slip stitch if you're going to use a small hook to weave in. If you're using a needle, grab your scissors now and cut your yarn, which I've already done. Then pull the hook up and pull the tail through. Thread the tail onto your big-eyed needle. We're going to make a fake slip stitch to finish off the trim. Insert the needle under both loops of the first slip stitch. It doesn't matter whether you approach the slip stitch from above or from below. I'm going to go up this time. Just a moment, I've split the yarn. I won't be able to pull the needle through. Let me try again. There, the needle is properly under both loops. I pull the yarn through. Then insert the needle down into the middle of the last slip stitch and into the inside of the basket and pull the yarn through. Look, That's made what looks like a final slip stitch. Now I need to weave in this tail and all the others. It's much like weaving in normal yarn, except I can't split this yarn, which I like to do usually. If I split t-shirt yarn with this needle, the eye of the needle just gets stuck. I'm taking the yarn back and forward on itself so it won't come unraveled. 3 times is usually the right number. This will be enough. You need to do the other tails too. I'm not going to cut this because I'm going to demonstrate with the hook, but I like to leave about 1 centimetre of tail. I find that t-shirt yarn tries to wriggle free otherwise. If you're using a small hook for your weaving in, you'll slip stitch all the way around, and when you work the last slip stitch, you need to cut your yarn, which I've already done. You might notice that I've finished 1 stitch further over than you. Please just ignore that. When I unravelled after doing the demo with the needle, I pulled my yarn through at a different point, so my final slip stitch is over the handle, which doesn't look quite as neat. Unfortunately, I gave this basket away before I watched the video back, so I wasn't able to refilm this bit or fix the basket. Please ignore my little mess up. Now, for how to use the hook. When you've cut your yarn, pull the hook and slide the tail out. Then grab your little hook. I'm using a 5mm hook. The first thing I'm going to do is pull the tail to the inside of the basket. To do that, I insert my hook into the last stitch I slip stitched into from the inside of the basket to the outside. I wrap the yarn around the hook and I pull the yarn inside the basket. Have a look. That is about as neat as you can get without a needle. Try to get the final slip stitch to sit properly so it keeps its V shape. And the way I pull the tail into the basket is basically how I'm going to do the weaving in. I insert my hook into the bit of the stitch that I want to pull the yarn through. I wrap the yarn around the hook and I pull the tail through the stitch. And like that, I pull the tail so it goes back and forth on itself so it can't slip out and unravel. I want the weaving in to be hidden on the inside of the basket, so I check it's not showing. Take it back on itself. And one more time. And it's as easy as that. Then cut the tail a little closer so it's not poking up out of the basket. The other tails are done in the same way. I'll do the magic circle with you as it's so important. I turn the basket inside out. If the circle has slipped open, pull on the tail to close it. Use your needle or your hook to pull the tail through the stitches back and forth so the circle stays closed. First, I take the tail in the direction it's heading. Then I take it back the other way. Then I take it in another direction away from the center. And I'll pull it through a couple more stitches. And then back on itself once more. And that should do the trick. Cut the yarn and admire the basket. I'll leave you with a peek at all of the finished Mother's Day baskets. I love Mother's Day. For the last couple of years, my mum and I have celebrated each other because we're both pretty fantastic mums, and also our lovely mum friends. Mum filled these baskets with home-baked biscuits, hand cream and chocolates. and delivered them to our friends. I know it's past Mother's Day and that Mother's Day is on different days in different countries, but if you're a mum and you're watching this, a belated Happy Mother's Day to you. Thank you for watching. I hope your basket turns out beautifully. If you've enjoyed the video, I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel. If you're not convinced yet, watch one of these videos while you're making your mind up. See you next time.